Alright, what's up everybody? It has finally stopped raining and blowing wind. It's been insanely windy here in California. And so I thought I'd take this opportunity where it's not a total shit show to make an FSD beta video. Because I noticed that... What the hell was that? I guess that was a peacock. There's a lot of peacocks around here, but I noticed that while we were all waiting on V11 and focusing on that, the existing FSD beta seems to have gotten really good. So I thought, okay, let me make a video and explore that a little bit. I haven't tried it too much lately, but let's see how it does. So we're gonna go on a 30-minute drive to Manhattan Beach. Good sensitivity around the pedestrian there, very cautious. So, I think Tesla basically solved self-driving. The software obviously doesn't work that well yet, but I think fundamentally they've really done some great stuff here. They have an extremely powerful system with just computer vision that's able to pretty much drive the car, including in some really complex scenarios. And I think the way they figured out how to deploy it with driver assistance, it makes sense. They can make money on it, and they can get the software out and start improving it. They can start getting these demands from customers like, hey, I want this to be better, I want this to be fixed. It's a very powerful forcing function. So I'm very bullish, having watched them for 2 years just sort of improve the software on what they're going to be able to do in the future now that they have hundreds of thousands of users. Some of the behaviors have just gotten so much more sophisticated that it just astounds you, right? Because for some reason it's hard to imagine the software getting better for people. They just think, okay, this is all software can do. And yet it's gotten so much better, it's not even funny. When I first got the software over 2 years ago now, it could barely even drive straight. Like, it was so sensitive to little things. It would go left and right, and it was like, it doesn't even know how to just drive in a lane and go straight. And the first time I turned it on, it just dove straight towards the curb, and I had to disengage it really quickly. But now look at it. It's able to drive the car. It really does what it's supposed to say. Is it 100% perfect? No. But where did we get this idea that, you know, anything in software is 100% perfect? I mean, I guess science fiction or whatever, people watched iRobot and they said, oh, we're going to have these self-driving cars and they're just going to work. But then you think back to your experience of software. You think to using Windows 95 and even Apple products that are, you know, a little bit better, or Linux, or pretty much any software product you've used. When has anything that involves computers ever worked, right? Things break all the time. And software bugs and challenges are ubiquitous. Even among the biggest companies, they have downtime, they have issues, they have bugs where people lose data, computers fail, they break. So that's just the reality of it. I think it's pretty clear to everybody that we're trending towards a situation where all cars will be driverless. Every new car sold will be driverless, will have the capability to drive itself without anybody inside. And this will be able to be accomplished without really dramatically increasing the cost of the car. That's evident from where we are today, right? And this is using hardware that was designed 5 years ago. So the new hardware 4, more compute power, upgraded sensors, as well as improvements in the software that are going to ship to the existing cars and the new cars. It's going to be, just make this look like a complete piece of shit compared to what the software can do in the future. So when you really look at it this way and you say, okay, this is going to be built into every car, you realize that it's probably going to become the most important thing that consumers look at when they look at a car very soon. All of the other things that they used to care about, they're not going to care about it as much as whether they have to drive it. And if it does have a self-driving, because there will be various different products on the market with their own self-driving systems or using different suppliers, how well it drives is going to make a big difference to your sanity, your comfort, your level of fear, anxiety. It's going to quickly become the biggest factor that people look at. All right, here we got sort of a very interesting situation. There's a very tricky intersection here. Okay, this isn't good. Oh, this is interesting. It kind of did what that guy did, right? Which is kind of went into the intersection and waited for them to finish crossing. It's kind of interesting because before you would see the software kind of get stuck in that kind of situation. Like it's saying, okay, let me wait for these people to cross, but then they cross and then someone else goes and it just gets stuck there forever. So seeing the car kind of negotiate through the intersection that way, I don't know, maybe it was actually a mistake that it did that, or, oh, what the fuck? That wasn't good. I don't know what happened there. I guess the path planner had an error. And it looks like it's still struggling a little bit, but I didn't have to take over. But I probably should have. If you see the car do something like that, you should take over. But anyway, what were we talking about? I forgot. Let me just pause to reflect a little bit. Oh yeah, so I was saying nothing in software is perfect. We saw the end state in the science fiction that, okay, we're going to have these cars that drive themselves. And it's clear when you look at the software that we're clearly trending in that direction. I don't think anybody doubts it anymore. The conversation isn't really, are autonomous cars possible? A lot of people said it's impossible. The question is now really, okay, how many more years is it going to take of development to get the software to a level of reliability where it can start to be deployed? And the answer, of course, is that we already have some driverless deployments in limited scenarios. So it's really now just about scaling, getting it to that level of reliability in more scenarios. And we're headed in that direction. I can't tell you exactly the dates when we'll hit certain milestones, but I can tell you that we're headed in that direction. So nobody really talked about this phase in history, which is really several years, where we start to have automated driving software, but it just doesn't work perfectly. But then when you sort of think about it intuitively, it's like, well, of course, before it works perfectly, it's going to not work as perfectly. With all computer software, it's been like that, right? Before we had Google web search, we had Alta Vista and Yahoo and other web searches that weren't as good, right? And then just having that out there and having people use it, people then start to innovate. They think about new ways to do things. I'm going to increase the speed here. I think we're going a little too slow. I'll tell it to go 5 over. But yeah, you know, we have software that isn't as good, and then people use it, they demand it improves, and then it gets better over time. No software has ever emerged on the market and just been perfect from day one, right? So a lot of people just think about autonomy as some mystical thing. It's just software at the end of the day, right? It's a very different kind of software. It's more complex than any other software we've had to write. It's software where the input space can be anything. Anything can happen. And it needs to know how to handle anything. Okay, that was good. This is a situation where in the past, you might have seen the software actually miss this left turn lane because there were so many cars in the left turn lane that that there wasn't that much room for it to get in a little late. So a lot of times in the past, I would see it just miss the left turn lane because there are so many cars there, it's not able to get over in time. But you could see here it was able to do that. It even sort of crossed over a little on the yellow, which it needed to do to be able to get into this lane. So very impressive that it's able to do that now. Missing turns because of FSD is very annoying. It's like, wow, why am I wasting my time with this piece of shit? It just makes users frustrated. So these are the things that are really going to matter when they're selecting a car. Yeah, with the Tesla, I don't miss the turn. With the other car, it misses the turn more often, right? And I end up being late to work, and I'm going to get fired now. So these things are very important, right? People say, "Oh, well, who's going to buy that ridiculous-looking Cybertruck?" I'll tell you who's going to buy it. People who don't want to drive. People who want to be on a call with their client, say, "Hey, I'm on my way." They want to focus fully on it and not really have to worry about driving. Just sort of monitor, make sure the car isn't about to crash, but generally the car can handle most of the driving task itself. And they'll buy a Cybertruck for that. Who's going to say, well, okay, the Cybertruck can drive itself, and let's be clear, from the day it comes out, it will have this software, actually a much better version of this software, built into the truck, every single one they sell. You don't need a special package. You can pay $200 even on a truck that doesn't have it and activate it on that car for the month. They will say, I want this software, and they're not going to say, you know what, I really want a pretty truck. I want a traditional looking truck. It's really all about looks for me and functionality, utility, the fact that I'm saving on fuel, that I don't have to drive. This doesn't matter to me at all. It just has to look like a traditional truck. I mean, people are much less traditional than you think. People love to be avant-garde, trendsetters, you know, individualist, trying something new, something weird. Oh, I was about to disengage for that emergency vehicle, but they turned off their sirens. And it just makes driving so much easier and safer. You know, I just can't believe the stupid things I see written about FSD. It's like, wow, people really don't get it. This is a safety technology that can actually be deployed into every car. It's cost effective enough to build into every new car. And they do not understand. The car understands what's happening around it, okay? The car understands what's happening around it. This is a paradigm shift. It's not just some dumb machine that we use to move around. It has an understanding of what's happening around it and can make sure not to harm other people, even when the driver of the car isn't paying attention, if they're on their phone or something like that, they're distracted by something else, the car has a second set of eyes that can help prevent a life-threatening situation for both the driver and other people who are outside the car. So it's like, how are we not doing everything we can to accelerate the deployment of this technology as fast as possible, to mandate it? Why? And instead people are, just like, oh, well, drivers are going to get distracted. They're going to use their phone. Excuse me. Drivers are already using their phone all the time when they're driving manually. Like, I look around at some of these cars and people are on their phone all the time. Especially here in LA traffic, it's kind of ridiculous. And with FSD, you actually can't be on your phone. So, like, if I take out my phone right now and I'm, like, pretending to use it, then eventually you get, like, a driver monitoring alert, and it'll tell you to pay attention to the road. So you basically can't use the FSD beta while you're using your phone because of this camera here, the driver monitoring system. And that alone puts the safety much higher than anything we've seen from a manually driven car. Because people who are manually driving just aren't giving their full attention. They're very confident in their driving. They think, okay, I can do this without having to pay full attention. And they can most of the time. That's why they get away with it. But every once in a while, they just completely miss something and crash or kill somebody or just damage their car. So having a system like this where you can basically ensure that the user is not using their phone, that alone is going to dramatically improve the safety on the road. And when you think about how the car is driving, when I drive, it's not like this. It's not as cautious. It's not as smooth. I'm really speeding a lot more than the car is. I tend to make more, how do I say it without incriminating myself, more unsafe choices in terms of, okay, is the light turning yellow? Am I going to stop or am I going to go? If I'm driving manually, I'm probably going to go. But the car actually stops for yellow lights. Unless it's, unless it can't stop in time and it's better to go across, then it'll go across. But if it's appropriate to stop for a yellow light, it's not going to speed up and try and make the light. It's going to actually say, okay, we can't make it. Let's slow down and stop. That's something that I would never do. It's very cautious of pedestrians and cyclists. It can even see a cyclist approaching from behind and move over to give them extra room to travel safely on your side between the cars. So it's an incredibly powerful safety technology. And most of the critics, they have no clue what they're talking about, right? This is purely an academic endeavor for them, right? They wrote a paper about it or something, they studied the effects of driver engagement and attention in a psychology lab or something like that. But they haven't actually experienced the product or talked to people who use the product to understand how millions of people are able to use it safely every day. See, there's an example of a light I never would have stopped for. And, maybe there's a 1 in a million chance that I'm speeding up for the light and I don't see somebody's actually starting to cross a little bit early and I hit them, right? Or something like that. And the car just makes a safer choice. And it doesn't get road rage. It doesn't do any of these sort of reckless behaviors that humans tend to do all too often. So there's huge benefits that just don't get talked about. And you know what? For a lot of people, especially, people of color, certain people who are nervous about encounters with the police, who are worried about maybe an escalation. And, you know, I've worked with law enforcement before in my business. There's a lot of great people in law enforcement. I'm not trying to put down law enforcement here. But just by following the driving laws more, you're less likely to come into contact with law enforcement, get a ticket, and end up, you know, maybe going to jail or getting cited for something else, because your Tesla is just following the law, right? Whereas if you're driving recklessly, speeding, doing those sorts of things that humans tend to do more often, you could get into an encounter with the police that ends up being bad for you in a number of ways. So there's also some safety added that way too. And really, I think it's just something that is so convenient that when you get used to it, nobody's going to want to drive a car without it. I mean, you just look at all the Teslas in these videos. This guy's definitely driving manually. But they're really fun to drive. But what's great is you can have fun driving them when you want, and then you can just put it in autopilot when you don't want to drive and just let the car handle the driving task. And it's able to handle pretty much everything. Alright, so we're just cruising along PCH here. We got some hills. Very smooth driving. Very little unexpected braking. Hopefully I didn't jinx it there. But overall very good. You know, I couldn't even drive with this level of comfort, really. Very nice ability finding the lane there, even though the lane was not visible to me for a short period of time. It was able to still see that. Okay, we got construction. We got a car pulling out. It slightly moved to the left a little bit, but didn't hard brake or anything like it sometimes would in the past when you had a car coming fast. There's Skechers headquarters. And we got a left turn coming up in 1.5 miles on Rosecrans. And here's another yellow light. Watch this very smooth stop. Look at this. It used to be very abrupt. You know, it'd be very uncomfortable. After I'd be making like an hour of FSD videos like this or something, I'd have like a headache sometimes. Just because it would hit the brakes so hard. And now it's so smooth. It can stop much more smoothly than I can. And as a matter of fact, a lot of times I don't ever even stop. Even if I'm driving manually, I'll just turn on traffic aware cruise control or FSD beta and have it handle the stop for me. Because a lot of times it can stop more smoothly and more perfectly than I can. So this is the really interesting thing about it too, is just how it's a hybrid drive. It's human and computer together. It's not one or the other. We don't have to choose. We can have in this interim stage where the software is still being perfected both. And the human can be in control at the times where that's best, and the computer can be in control at the time that that's best, as decided by the user of the car. So I think this is really not understood. So many people say, well, when are we going to have autonomous cars? When are all of the cars going to be autonomous? And what we don't realize is we've already gotten to a point where there's very few 100% manually driven new cars coming out. A lot of the new cars that are coming out have at least automatic emergency braking and some basic form of lane keeping assist, forward collision warning. These types of features are becoming pretty standard, at least some primitive form of them. Obviously nobody has what Tesla has here. But when you're driving a Tesla, these active safety features are available all the time. They're running all the time. So for example, if I'm driving and I'm veering out of my lane and someone's about to hit me, the car can just move. it knows that that's going to happen and it moves. If you tell the car to drive into a lake, it's smart enough to know that that's a lake and not do it. So it has some really, really amazing perception capabilities that are really powerful. So at no point are you driving 100% manually. You've always got this AI sort of backing you up and providing assistance, being able to correct for your errors. Like if I accelerated and I went too fast and I didn't brake and I was about to drive into this car, the car could notice that I had made that mistake and actually stop the car for me, even if I was driving manually. And then of course there's the autopilot features, and people really switch back and forth so much between manual driving and autopilot. That's really the typical use case. What I'm doing here, where I 100% let FSD beta drive, nobody actually would do that, or nobody does that, because why inconvenience yourself to use FSD beta all the time, even when it's doing something suboptimal, like maybe missing a turn or whatever, when you can just take over and do it yourself in some cases. So I think the typical use case really involves the human and the computer switching over back and forth really quickly. And that's actually what consumers are going to want. They don't necessarily want to be in the back of an autonomous car annoyed that the software is doing something wrong. Let's take a long time to perfect the software, but just have it with human control in the meanwhile, right? I think this is what consumers actually want. And I think this is what's going to be successful in the marketplace. All right, we got a left turn coming up, so it needs to move over into the left lane, but there are some cars here. So it looks like it's slowing down to allow itself to get behind this car. So very cool to see it sort of slow down and inch its way into the lane like that. Very, very good. That's something that you would see it struggle with in previous versions where, oh, that's the wrong left turn. But you know what? It got out of the left turn lane. That was very good. It's like, okay, we may make some mistakes in our perception, but can we correct those mistakes before they become errors that mess up the trip? Like, for example, taking a wrong turn. And now here's the left turn that we actually have to do. And there's 2 lanes. It used to really struggle with when there was 2 left turn. Oh, God. A little bit of unexpected braking there, but luckily nobody was behind me. I was getting ready to press the accelerator if there was somebody behind me. This does happen. You know, a lot of people complain about unneeded braking, but of course it wants to make sure it stops for everything it stops for. So sometimes it's wrong. Sometimes it thinks there's something it has to stop for and it doesn't, or it overreacts a little bit. But just keep your foot by the accelerator, and if it does that, then use the accelerator to sort of override it and make sure somebody doesn't rear-end you, because nobody likes to get rear-ended and have to stop and have damage to their car and all that, of course. So definitely be aware. When you look at Waymo cruises, all the other autonomous cars, number one source of crash they see is rear-ending. And I'm sure for Tesla, I think it's about 35% of autopilot crashes are rear-ending. So it's significant. These cars can sort of brake erratically in ways that people don't expect, right? People haven't fully learned that there are these robot cars out there. There's a lot of them out there, and they don't always behave like humans do. So it's going to take people some time to adapt to that. And in the meantime, you know, we need to be very courteous and make sure we don't cause more accidents because we're using this kind of technology. It can be very, very transformational to safety when used correctly, but it can also be unsafe if used incorrectly. So take the time to learn about it, to understand it, to make sure that you are a good, expert ADAS user. And that concludes our video for today. I think Tesla is super undervalued, honestly. I mean, look at this thing. It can drive around with just computer vision, with just cameras. People aren't giving them enough credit. They did the impossible. They did what everybody said they were never going to be able to do. And they get so much shit because people are so passionate about this project. They want more, they want better. But they're really doing something really incredible. And we've got another new version coming, V11, coming soon. I think it's, I think they're just doing a phenomenal job. So huge props to the Tesla team, and can't wait to see what they do next. Honestly, I think the stock is probably very undervalued given this technology. Not financial advice, of course, but this AI technology they're developing, the applications actually go far beyond self-driving into robotics and other fields. So very bullish on Tesla and the FSD project as always.